Hello there and welcome to another Hero Arts video. It's Michelle Short here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how to emboss with stencils. You can use any type of stencil for this, and you can also use any type of cardstock or paper, and I think it's a really good way to get more use out of your stencils. So the stencils I'm going to be using today are the honeycomb stencil, and then I'm also going to be using the star stencil from the sky stencil pair. The other one in the set is clouds, but I'm going to be using these stars today. So like I said, you can use any type of stencil for this, and you can use any type of cardstock or paper as well. I'm just going to be embossing onto some white cardstock, just because I happen to like the look of that. But you can emboss on coloured cardstock, you could emboss on watercolour paper. Sky's the limit really in terms of what you want to emboss onto. But you will need one of these embossing mats, and this is just a piece of rubber that you can emboss with, and it's really good for embossing with dies as well, so I definitely think it's worth the investment. You may also need some cardstock shims. So this is literally just a piece of cardstock that you can add into your sandwich just to make the sandwich a little bit thicker. Depends how deep you want the embossing. You can use any type of die cutting machine for this. I happen to use the Cuttlebug. That's just the die cutting machine that I have, but you can use any type of die cutting machine. You just want to make sure that you're using it on the embossing folder settings that you would to emboss with embossing folders. So for my Cuttlebug, I'm using the large spacer plate A, and then I'm going to be adding on one of the cutting plates called B. And then I'm adding on those embossing mats. I happen to have two because it works really well for my machine, but all of the machines are different. You just need to experiment on how thick you want that embossing to be. So then I've placed my cardstock piece down, and then I'm just placing my stencil over the top. If you have a stencil where it makes a really big difference how it's sort of laid out, like this one, I really want the honeycomb pieces to be straight. You can add some tape, but just be careful, because wherever you add the tape, if you add it onto the cardstock piece, the impression of the tape might show up, so you might want to place the tape onto your actual cutting mats instead of onto the cardstock. But I'm just being really careful here to line that stencil up, and then I can place my cutting mat over the top, and I'm just being really careful to hold that sandwich tight so that nothing sort of moves around in there, and then I can just run that through my Cuttlebug. So I'm just running that through, and then I can remove the stencil, and as you can see, it's left a really nice impression. You can actually use the front side, or you could use the back side, a really nice debossed impression as well. I haven't made it two-dimensional because I want to stamp on top of this piece, but if you wanted to make it more dimensional, you could actually stamp first and then emboss afterwards. So here I'm using the exact same sandwich, and this time I'm going to be using the star stencil. So like I said, this is from the sky stencil pair. And for this one, it actually really doesn't matter how I place the stencil on it. Personally, I don't think so anyway. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. I don't particularly need the stars to be lined up in any way. So I'm just placing my cutting mat over the top, and then I can just run that through my die cutting machine again. And then once again, I can just remove that stencil, and I've got some really nice stars embossed onto this cardstock piece. A little bit difficult to see on camera, but in real life you can definitely see them. So let's put the cards together. I'm going to stamp the sentiments first, and for this first card with the honeycomb background, I'm using the Busy as a stamp set. So I'm going to use my Mini Misty to stamp the sentiments. Because of that embossed piece, I want to make sure that I stamp really well. Like I said, you could stamp first and then emboss, but I decided to do it the other way around. So I'm just inking up my stamp here with some dye ink, some black dye ink. And then because I can, I'm going to stamp it twice. It actually stamped out really well the first time, but like I said, because I can, I might as well stamp it twice. And then for my second card with the star background, I'm going to be using the unicorn stamp and cut. And this sentiment I'm going to stamp is in 3 separate pieces, so I'm going to stamp them all separately just to make sure that I get it aligned how I want it to. And again, I'm stamping them all twice just so I can get a nice impression. And to line up the sentiments, I'm using a grid here, a transparency grid, just to line everything up, and then I can remove that and then stamp the images down. Again, using that same dye ink. Next I've got a cardstock piece here. This is made from the daffodil paper from the Sunshine layering papers, and I've just cut that down and folded it on to make an A2 sized card base. And then I've attached my piece onto that, and then as you can see I've stamped and cut some little bees from the Busy As A stamp set again, and then cut them out with the coordinating dies. And then I can just place them down, see where I want them to go, and then I can just add some little foam pieces onto the back of those bees. Just cutting them down, and then I can remove the backings of those and then place them down onto the card. And I'm just doing the same with the other bees there as well. I'm keeping this card really simple, so I just want to add a few embellishments. I'm using some little gemstones here, some clear gemstones, and then also I'm using some of the smaller sequins from the Ombre Sunshine sequin mix, just placing them down. And that's that card finished, and I'm going to move on to my... So I have my star background piece here, and I'm just going to again add some adhesive onto the back of this and stick that down onto an A2 sized card base made from lilac cardstock from the floral layering papers. And then again off screen I have stamp and coloured and also die cut some images from that same unicorn stamp and cut set. And I'm just working out where I want them to be, and then I can add some adhesive onto the back of those. So I'm sticking down the rainbow with some flat adhesive, and then also one of those clouds. And then I've added some foam tape, or some foam pads, sorry, onto the back of the unicorn and also the cloud. And then I can just place them down. And then again, I just want to embellish these slightly. I'm using some of the sequins from the Ombre Purple sequin mix. Just using some multi-medium matte just to stick those down. And a little pickup tool, just I find it a little bit more helpful to place those. And then because unicorns need to be sparkly, I'm just adding on some clear Wink of Stella onto the hair of the unicorn and also onto her horn. And that's the cards finished for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Links to the products will be over on the Hero Arts blog, and I will have a link to the blog post in the description bar on YouTube. As you can see, I think they work really nicely with that embossed background. Just gives a little bit extra to some clean and simple cards. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.